Hello and welcome to the Psycho Studios podcast. This is podcast number 12. And on this 12th podcast episode, we're going to let you know about our future endeavors with this podcast, which is shaping things up a little bit more because we are as well going to be doing a video portion to go along with our podcast, which will be coming out possibly the first of next month. But we are still going to be doing the auditory version of it on Spotify and other platforms. But YouTube and other platforms that we can see that we can put the video portion on, we will be doing that as well. And with the video format change, we are going to change up a little bit of the podcast like we've been doing. You know, it's a process of evolution that we've been doing. I mean, this is, like I said, the 12th one, so it's a year of doing it. And we haven't put a lot of production cost into it, which is fine because it's, starting up and learning. But we are going to, moving forward, talk about movies that are just coming out in the theater, like releasing a podcast maybe the next day or maybe even that night if we've really thought about it and talked about it enough. And also bring on guests, people that we know. So my dad also has had a few people that sounds like they want to be interviewed on the podcast as well.
Yeah, Sean, Rob, AJ, our peculiar friends, they definitely said I thought there would be some hesitation, and they immediately said yes. So, we'll see, how people follow through on things, but you had mentioned some other ideas about guests.
Right, so I am thinking as well, not just my friends too, but thinking of, asking people after they've seen the movie or even a YouTuber that I do watch. His name is Philip, and he hires people off of Craigslist and a few other
that's
places.
Awesome. Yeah, Craigslist.
I guess it's beautiful. Really big in Hollywood too, where they put their information out there and they want to be hired just to do something.
It's funny you say that because through my research, I saw Craigslist pop up and I didn't know if it was real or not.
So obviously, we'll meet them at a public place before we get them to come over to our house. So.
And when you said like after the movie, you mean literally at the theater after the movie, asking somebody, "Hey."
That's possible.
Okay.
But it's just we are gonna try to push that way, but also, I mean, we might have different podcasts in between that, going on different subjects. No politics still, and
leave it at the door.
I believe that I will be making a YouTube channel myself to kind of show the journey that we've been on and kind of the progress and evolution that will be going on forward. This is all really new to both of us, and especially me. Being in front of camera is going to be something different, especially because I'm not one to like pictures of myself or my voice, but I feel like that's most of the human race, unless you're in love with yourself.
Or an actor.
Yeah, something. Well, I think if you're an actor, you love yourself in some respect.
Yeah.
So it's important for us it's going to be sloppy, I would say, the next couple of podcasts, especially. There's going to be a lot of hats that I'm going to have to put new on. But I'm excited for the journey that we're going to go on. And our YouTube channel has definitely slowly been upgrading, and our website as well. But our YouTube channel is going to be rebranded, and it already shows that. But it's Psycho Studios Podcast. I don't know why that I didn't say that before. I'm going to make sure on our Spotify is up to date as well. But we're still the same us, but info on there is going to be slightly adjusted to correspond to what we actually are. And probably going forward, I'll be, instead of called Mr. Z, probably just go by my real name, Mykal. And so you know that we are a father and son.
Yeah, we're rebranding, and you had suggested that. So instead of Mr. W, I'll go by Mike.
Right. So, or I'll just, I don't know if necessarily I'll call you dad on the podcast.
No, that's cool. I think the audience will get a hang of things as we move our way through the evolution.
So, but going forward, just to speak on the behalf of like movies that come out, they don't necessarily have to be horror movies, but we're, that's our bread and butter, especially because that's what our movie production company and the stuff that we personally work on is definitely geared toward that. But I can definitely say we are gonna be mostly horror, but I still think if there's a weird movie or a movie that
Like The
everyone's talking
Lighthouse.
about, I mean that's still in the horror genre.
I know.
So
Come on, that's a
all right,
stretch though.
whatever. And we're definitely gonna be talking about it, and I'm looking forward to interviewing our friends and people that we know, and maybe don't even know them that well, and what that looks like. And I definitely would like to hear from our audience once we gain audience members, what they think and what I think that's what I'm most excited about is interactions with people and people that we get to know. The person that my dad introduced us to, Chuck, a neighbor. I mean, I just think about that doorway that's opened up. It's just meeting people and talking to them. I mean, I think that's one of the coolest things in conversations you can have. And I think just I know there's many podcasts out there, but I think getting to know an everyday person or just an average person, knowing
Real
what
people,
real people and what
Yeah.
they've gone through.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, it's most important.
Yeah, it sounds cliche, and that's the problem with cliches is that you hear it all the time, and then you become numb to it. But connectivity,
Totally.
I know that you hear that term networking, especially in the entertainment business, but just connecting with people. I don't care if it sounds cliche; it is the most beautiful thing about life, really.
Exactly. Can't agree more. So I guess now this will be the portion. It's definitely going to be a lot shorter, but we are
Yes.
going to be talking about two movies since how we saw them in quick succession, and we're transitioning to a different type of podcast. So the two movies that we'll be going over is Maxine and
Long legs.
right. I feel like I was creeped out more by you saying that than when I saw
The
the
movie
movie.
itself, yeah. No, I get it. And remember what they said about the film. It was touted as being sick and twisted and unbelievably scary.
Yeah, so the first 30 seconds is after that it's over. So it's I'm gonna go off of long legs.
We'll
I
go
mean,
long legs first, okay?
the imagery and the camera work I would say is a standout, so that's why I'm not gonna give it a 1. And then the very short but sweet glimpses of Nicolas Cage as Daddy Longlegs, whatever you want to call him, I don't know. But anyways, I would definitely give it a 2. That's we were talking about before the podcast, and I'm thinking, ugh, I there's nothing redeeming about it. It's a ripoff of Seven almost to a T, and there's nothing new or brings to the table. I mean, them trying to sneak in the devil in there at least 12 times with imagery and stuff. A lot of it was just lost on me because it was nothing different than other movies I've seen in the past.
Yeah, and I agree. It's funny that you say that. I prefer to call Nicolas Cage Daddy, but I hear what you're saying. Like Nicolas Cage, he's the consummate pro, right? I mean, I don't know if I've seen him in anything, even if it is a low reviewed movie where he isn't good. And the makeup effects on him are so spot on, but there just isn't enough of it. And like you said, it's so watered down. They're trying to be so many different things. I thought that I listed it as basically being too busy for me. I gave it a score of a 3, and that's probably strong for me. And really, it seems like it's borrowed a lot of things from Silence of the Lambs as well. So it's just like you said. You mentioned devil part, and it was all over the place. Just very disappointing. But regardless, I still enjoy going to see the film with you and your girlfriend, and just that experience, right? Being at the theater.
Right, it's that whole aspect, and then I think that's important. I mean, I one day definitely want to be able to be behind the camera and in the camera, whatever you want to say.
Put me in the camera.
Put me in the camera, but I definitely it's cool and exciting that something's low budget as that, and that it's gonna be, maybe grossing 100 million, and that's one of their biggest films ever. Neon, that is the production company behind that. So
Well, it's funny you mentioned it. I don't have the updated numbers. The information I have in front of me was from about 8 days ago, and budget of around 10 million, 57 million gross at that time, And so you're right. I mean, it's interesting. And you talked about Neon. I'll just share one thing because that name has come up a lot in my recent research, and you knew of them, but they used what was called guerrilla marketing for that. Do you remember what film really started the whole guerrilla marketing thing even before social media was a big thing?
Well, two movies come to mind, which is the Blair Witch Project.
Ding, ding, ding.
And
Yep.
then the huge, I would say, out of all of the movies as of recent times, what was like the biggest component of movies like that? It's Paranormal Activity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They were
was a
so
lot of
huge.
parallels. Yep.
And then also Cloverfield was like
Cloverfield.
that
I was
as
going to
well.
say the same thing. You took the words right out of my mouth.
That's three total, but I definitely think those, classic. But those, Cloverfield and Blair Witch definitely
Found footage.
that was perfect for them. But I mean, man, the first, Paranormal Activity, what it started and what it did and what it accomplished, I think is great. But overall, as a movie as a whole, I know I'm going off subject here, but just weak, but definitely better than Long Legs.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing. I do want to give one shout out. We talked about Nicolas Cage. I wish I knew how to pronounce her name. I don't know if it's Mykal Monroe, but she's basically the star of this film, and she's from, at least near and dear to me, It Follows. I've seen her in a lot of other films too, including The Watcher, not to be confused with The Watchers by M. Night Shyamalan's relative. But I can just tell you that you can see she's an up and comer. She stood out in this movie and struggled through that dialogue and the story. So I just shout out to Ms. Monroe because she really is an up and comer, and I love watching her on the screen.
Definitely. So, do you have a quote for this movie?
So I know you're giving me a hard time about that. I'm a quote guy. What can I say? Maybe it's my age, but I have two quotes, and I'll say them. They're short. But the first one is, clowns can get away with murder.
And who said that?
Well, do you want me to be politically correct?
Well, I want you to say it like it is.
So that was brought to us by John Wayne Gacy.
Okay.
Which, if you know the history of him, that quote should give you the chills. I mean, he even painted clowns when he was in prison, and those paintings have gone for millions of dollars. And just to hear, I can almost hear him in that odd voice he had, that they could get away with murder. In his case, thankfully, he was ultimately caught. But that quote resonated with me for Long Legs. And then one more, because there is that FBI piece running through the whole film. And this quote comes to us from the 60s, and it's, I think the FBI is the premier law enforcement agency in all of human history. And that was John F. Kennedy. I just thought those were so fitting for this film.
I think that's very interesting, and I gotta say, when you said that who that was, the clown, I still hear it in a clown voice, and then squeaky nose at the end of that. So
Oh, yeah.
that's what comes to mind.
We should have that as a prop, a squeaky nose.
And not to go into much, but it's just so funny to me that people want to be so politically correct, but then we have the fascinations with killers and stuff like that, and we want to give them still power by purchasing their artwork. I mean, I think that's kind of sick in itself. So
No, it is. It's sick and twisted, and that's you know how I am. I'm probably overly PC, being in the corporate world like I was for 20 plus years. But that's the only reason why I initially was just going to say it was a serial killer.
Totally, I understand, but
And that doesn't take away from the grief and that people that were impacted by that serial killer must have experienced, and I'm sure they're still experiencing today.
yeah, definitely the after effects is something I don't think a lot of people think about. But anyways, let's move off from that definitely sadder topic to how about a review of our next movie, Maxine.
I wish it wasn't a sadder topic.
It almost seems like it is a sadder topic. So this is number 3 of the trilogy, but there was talks before this movie came out, like there was going to be a few more movies after this, but we'll definitely see about that, seeing how not well it did at the theater. I believe it's still at the theater for a little bit longer, and then it's going to be coming out to digital soon.
Well, and I do have hot off the presses update. If you're interested, Ty West, director, editor, a little bit of everything, right?
Right.
He said, he confirmed last week, He's working on a fourth film.
Wow. So, but I wonder if Mia Goth is gonna still go through with that or
No
not.
mention of her. No mention of her.
But I hope it's some different way that it's gonna go on. But what's been important for me thinking about these movies is that they all came out at different times, but Pearl was such a quick succession after X, and X came out of nowhere and had pretty big actors attached to it too, so it's pretty trippy to me. But I think Pearl is great standout of the three films for me, and also Mia Goth, wrote. I don't know how much of it,
Right, they didn't tell us, but she was definitely collaborating, right?
but I think that was weird that for the third film, then she was a producer, but she didn't write or had any to say in that stuff. I
And
mean,
we almost felt it, didn't we?
yeah, so it's just weird to me that you would do that for this next film, and that's why I think it's definitely in the ranking of the three films, definitely would go X, Pearl, and then Maxine.
And Maxine way down.
Unfortunately, yes. And to give it right off the bat, the score. So I would definitely give it a 6. When I had first saw it, I definitely gave it a 7, just because it's not a terrible movie. Where it's set in the 80s, the music, the props, the scenery, it's gorgeous, well done, and there's not cheesy or bad acting in the movie. It's just the story itself. I just that's the problem with the trilogy, but it felt like that was just piecemealed and just out of left field most of the time. It had cool elements for so many different movies that came into this one, but the biggest problem to me is that it was a stretch at the end. A spoiler alert that her father, the pastor from the X that you could see that was on the television screens that we learned that was her father, and Maxine was the killer that was going around. It was basically a cult that this church was, and they were going around. It wasn't just him killing them. It was
such a stretch, though.
several of them
Right.
killing.
It almost seemed like, and this is just my take on it, but it almost felt like Ty West gave in to commercialism. Like he felt like that was going to be making this movie a huge success.
Yeah, I felt like that. Definitely agree with that. That the last two films were smaller scale, smaller set, and not grandiose. And then he's like, "Well, those made money, and now I have a name behind me. Maybe now, to appease a wider audience, I can do this."
Well, and oddly enough, and you know how hard it is sometimes to find the real details about budget, etc. According to IMDb Pro, they're claiming that the three films all cost just under $10 million to make, each one of them.
Each one of them, yeah.
So, suspect of that. I don't know what was put into 19. Sorry, I always think of it as a different movie, but Pearl, like that was a pretty small film. And other than paying the actors, I don't know where that $10 million went.
Production.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, what would you give it on a scale?
So I don't mean to come across as copying, and I know how much you hate that, but I'm giving it a 6. That's what I felt when I left the theater, and a lot like Longlegs. For me personally, I'm probably being generous, just because I tried to keep my expectations down. But X, I ran into that on a random Saturday night, didn't know anything about it, and I watched it, and I was like blown away by it. And then Pearl, you know how I am. I'm not big on period pieces that are set before 1950, but I still really appreciated that movie on a number of levels. And then I thought, wow, he's going to bring us into the mid 80s Hollywood. He's just going to blow my mind with it. And so it was hard for me to temper my enthusiasm and expectations. But I think what you talked about is it's the story, but it's not just that. Other than Mia Goth, I think the acting was flat. I don't even know how he came across picking Michelle Monaghan. Her claim to fame was the Ben Stiller remake of Heartbreak Kid. And I know she's been in other things. And then, is it Bobby Cannavale, how you say his name? And he's had smaller roles, but like there was no chemistry there. I mean, I know we want to keep this short, but I could go down the list. I was very disappointed in all of that. And I thought this was interesting that Ty West said this. He said, it's very important to me to find ways to relate the audience to the characters. This is the first thing to go in most mainstream horror films. And so that article went on to say that he felt like that's relating the audience to the characters, regardless of the type of horror movie, is the number one flaw with so many of them. And I thought, I'm sure that quote was before this movie, but I thought, wait a second, if you had just reread that quote, we might have had a different result.
Well, the problem is too. That's what I was gonna say. I mean, I know what you said, flat. I mean, it wasn't to me flat, but what was missing from the last two movies is how smart the dialogue was,
Smart.
and personable.
Yep.
Like
Real.
you when they talked, it seemed like that these were
Conversations.
intelligent people
Yes.
that understand where they are and what they're doing and what they want. And then you go to this movie, which, it seems like that was lost, maybe because there were so many characters.
I mean, other than the first few minutes when she's being interviewed for, the role, I thought it was kind of downhill from there. And I do want to give a shout out to Tyler Bates. So there's a guy that I would definitely love to have lunch or dinner with. He does music for so many movies. And it's not just the scores that he done. He did do the scores for both X and Pearl, but he pulls the music from that era. And let's give a shout out to the fact that they used Rat, I'm Insane at the beginning of the movie. If you followed us at all, you know that we're huge and I'm a ginormous Rat fan. So I have to give Tyler Bates a shout out. His music does move movies.
Completely agree.
I like it when we agree.
Me too. So, do you have any quotes for that movie?
I just pulled that from Ty West. I thought that was so powerful to me.
Okay, got it.
After having watched it, and then wait a second, if you had just kind of followed that, just a couple other things. There is a quote within the movie, and the quote says, "B movie with a movie idea." And I might not be capturing that quote exactly, but I thought that's what this is. It was supposed to be an A movie after what we'd saw with the first two, but it flip-flopped, and I thought, wow, that's so funny. That quote was so fitting, which was within the movie itself. Any guess on where the principal photography was shot?
Yeah, California.
Specifically, or do you want to keep it that broad?
LA.
Yeah, and we don't see that a lot.
We could see that it totally was at the lots of LA,
Sure.
and also the hills of LA. I mean, there's no way around that.
I guess I get so suspect of that because it seems like so much is shot in Canada. Or
I agree, but I mean, I'm not saying I've been to LA that many times, but the few handfuls that I have and seen the Hollywood Hills, I mean, there's no
I suppose
mistake.
that helps. Yeah, no, and it took them about 7 weeks to shoot it, which seems pretty average right now for that type of movie.
Right.
I do want to say one random thing about Mia Goth. She's currently being sued by a background actor that was playing a corpse. He's claiming that Goth kicked him intentionally. And I just thought it was funny because I guess that actor didn't see Goth in X or Pearl or even Infinity Pool. He doesn't know who he's messing with. So it'd be interesting to see how that turns out. And one other thing about, because we talked about the fact that Ty West is working on that fourth film, is that the original ending was said to be supernatural in nature. The ending had Pearl in it, but Ty West decided to go another route. And I thought that was telling because that makes sense why that movie looked like it did, because a lot of it does seem like you talked about different references in the film, and the fact that they were going to end it supernaturally makes sense why some things just don't line up.
Right.
Bottom line, the film was entertaining, and the film has net grossed over $9 million. And I would take that all day. So I know that's not a big number for a studio, but if you could net gross $9 million, would you take it?
Well, of course. So, well, do you have any other points? It seemed like that you were done there.
No, I know you want to keep it short, and
Yes.
you're getting good at editing me, so I want to make sure I bite my tongue.
So I just want to thank the few people that do listen to the podcast as of right now, and I'm looking forward to expressing and communicating with our new audience moving forward. And no matter how long that takes or what that looks like, I'm interested for this new chapter, and I really appreciate my dad following through and pushing forward for us to do this. I'm looking forward to you guys seeing our new setup on our YouTube videos and our production value, not just in our videos, but in our auditorial version of our podcast as well. I just want to say thank you. And you can check us out on psychostudios.com for our newsletter.
And that is www.psycho-studio.com.
That's correct. And there's links to our Twitter, Instagram, and our other socials, and our YouTube video links to watch our previous podcasts. And I appreciate everyone, and thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I second that, and thanks for moving us into 2024.
And remember, stay psycho.
Yes, please, everybody be safe and stay psycho.